If you've spent any time planning and researching a trip to Japan, you've probably heard the same thing over and over again. Japanese trains are always on time, and for the most part, that reputation is well deserved. Japan's train system is genuinely one of the most efficient in the world. Trains arrive with incredible precision, millions of people rely on them every single day, and compared to a lot of other countries, the whole system feels almost unbelievably organized. But there's something many tourists don't realize until they actually get here. Train delays in Japan do happen more often than you might expect. Now, that doesn't mean trains are constantly late in the way some people might imagine, but delays absolutely happen, sometimes for reasons that are surprising, confusing, or uniquely Japanese. So in this video, I want to talk about why trains in Japan get delayed, how Japan became so incredibly efficient in the first place, and most importantly, what you should actually do if your train suddenly stops in the middle of your trip. Why Japan's trains have such a perfect reputation. Before we talk about delays, it's important to understand why Japanese trains have such a strong reputation for punctuality. Because compared to most places in the world, including my hometown and country, Japan really does operate at another level. Whether you're riding local commuter trains, subways, express trains, or the famous Shinkansen or bullet train, everything is designed around consistency and timing. In major cities like Tokyo, Osaka, and Nagoya, trains aren't just transportation, they're part of daily life for millions of people. People go to work by train. Students go to school by train. Entire schedules are built around trains arriving exactly when they're supposed to. And because so many people depend on the system, even small delays matter. A train being late by just a few minutes can cause people to miss transfers, arrive late to work, or completely throw off a commute. This expectation for punctuality has been built over decades. After World War II, Japan invested heavily in rebuilding infrastructure, especially transportation. Then in 1964, something happened that completely changed rail travel in Japan. The launch of the Shinkansen, or bullet train. At the time, it was a revolutionary form of train travel. Japan introduced the world's first high-speed rail system, connecting cities faster than ever before and becoming a symbol of modern Japan. But speed wasn't the only thing that mattered. Reliability became just as important. Over time, train companies developed systems designed to minimize delays as much as possible, and that culture of precision slowly became part of everyday life in Japan, which is exactly why even small delays can feel like such a big deal here. So why do trains in Japan actually get delayed? Even though Japan's train system is incredibly efficient, it still has to deal with real-world problems. And some of the reasons trains stop in Japan are probably different from what tourists expect. Personal injury accident. If you spend enough time in Japan, there's a decent chance you'll eventually hear the phrase over the loudspeakers, jinshin jiko no tame. And if you notice the mood on the platform suddenly shift, there's a reason for that. Jinshin jiko translates to personal injury accident, and in most cases it means somebody has been struck by a train. Sometimes it's an accident. In my experience, usually it's intentional. Japan unfortunately has a higher visibility of railway suicides than many countries, partly because trains are such a central part of everyday life and stations are everywhere, especially in densely populated urban areas. Mental health struggles, social isolation, work pressure, financial stress, and the historical stigma around seeking psychological help here have all been discussed as contributing factors by researchers and media over the years. In recent years, many stations have added platform barriers, safety lights, and mental health intervention efforts in an attempt to reduce these tragedies on the tracks. In a system that relies on punctuality, even one incident on a single line can affect multiple routes and create delays that spread throughout an entire region. And for tourists, this can feel especially confusing because station announcements sometimes, well, quite honestly, usually, don't clearly explain what's happening in English. You might suddenly notice trains stopping, platforms filling up, and everyone around you checking their phones without really understanding why. Overcrowding. Another major reason for delays is something Japan is very familiar with: too many people. Japan's train system is efficient, but in major cities it's also operating under enormous pressure. During rush hour, stations like Shinjuku are moving millions of passengers every day. If boarding takes longer than expected, someone blocks a door, luggage gets caught, or platforms become overcrowded, even small interruptions can start affecting schedules. Again, because trains are timed so precisely, losing even a minute or two early in the route can slowly create delays throughout the whole day. Ironically, part of what makes Japan so punctual is also what makes delays feel so much more noticeable. Japan also deals with some pretty intense weather. Typhoons, heavy rain, snowstorms, strong winds, and earthquakes. You might hear announcements like kyofu, strong winds, or unten, miyawase, service suspended. Now, if you're coming from a country where trains keep running no matter what, this can seem frustrating at first.
What the hell?
But Japanese train companies tend to be extremely cautious when it comes to passenger safety. If weather conditions seem dangerous, they'll often slow trains down or stop them completely. This applies not only to smaller local lines, but even to the vaunted Shinkansen as well. And while that can definitely disrupt travel plans, it's also one of the reasons rail travel in Japan remains so safe overall. Byonin, which refers to a sick passenger or medical emergency. And yes, trains will absolutely pause while station staff or emergency responders help someone. When millions of people are using trains every day, situations like this happen more often than you might think.
Hey!
Why Japan still feels more efficient than everywhere else. So, if delays happen more often than you might think, why does Japan still feel so incredibly efficient? A big part of it comes down to how quickly problems are handled. When something goes wrong, train companies move fast. Announcements usually update constantly, though that's not always a big help for tourists as they're usually in Japanese. Staff begin redirecting passengers, routes get adjusted, and alternate transportation is often arranged surprisingly quickly. If you are lucky, you might even hear the phrase furikae yuso, which means alternate transportation. In some cases, if one train line shuts down, passengers may be allowed to transfer onto another company's rail line at no extra cost. That level of coordination between companies here is often pretty impressive. And then there's one of the most uniquely Japanese things about all of this: delay certificates. Though not really relevant for tourists, one interesting train-related fact is that Japan is so punctual that if your train is delayed, you can actually receive an official document proving it happened. This is called a chien shōmeisho, or delay certificate. People sometimes show these to employers or schools as proof that transportation delays caused them to be late. While, as mentioned, this doesn't really have any meaning for visitors, it's one of those things that feels strangely fascinating because it says a lot about how seriously punctuality is taken here. What tourists should do if their train gets delayed. So, let's say you're visiting Japan and suddenly your train stops. What should you actually do? First, don't panic. This probably sounds obvious, but Japan's train network is incredibly good at recovering from disruptions. Most delays are temporary, and station staff are usually already working on alternate solutions. Second, check more than just Google Maps. Google Maps works really well in Japan, but when delays happen, local transit apps can sometimes be even more useful. Apps like Norikae Anai or Yahoo Transit can sometimes provide faster updates during service disruptions. Also, especially if you are traveling on JR routes, don't be afraid to inquire at the JR ticket offices in most major stations for help. They usually have some basic English ability there, and in my many years of experience here, are usually very helpful. Third, learn a few basic train terms. You don't really need fluent Japanese, but knowing a few important words can make navigating delays much easier. Chien, or delays. Unten miyawase, service suspended. Furikae yuso, alternate route available. Once you recognize these words, station announcements can suddenly become a lot less intimidating and give you some idea of what to look for next. Fourth, give yourself more time than you think you need. This is probably one of the biggest mistakes tourists make. People hear that Japanese trains are incredibly punctual and start planning things way too tightly. If you're heading to the airport, catching a Shinkansen, or trying to make a reservation, build in extra time. Especially if you are changing trains or Shinkansen, make sure you check how much time you have to make your next train while transiting. Sometimes, if you ask JR staff or apps to book your travel involving multiple transfers, they will treat tourists like they are Japanese people and know the best way to get to your next train, while that often isn't the case for tourists, and it probably takes a lot longer to change trains.
Oh no!
Ask for the next connecting train with a longer interval in between if the first suggested option is too risky. Japan is reliable, but it isn't magic. Fifth, avoid rush hour if you can. Another big bit of advice: if your schedule is flexible, try not to travel during weekday commuter hours, because while Japan's trains are impressive, Tokyo rush hour is still Tokyo rush hour. And if you've ever seen videos of packed train cars online, yes, it can absolutely feel like that in real life. So, are Japan's trains perfect? Not really. Delays happen. Weather causes disruptions. Medical emergencies happen with millions of people using it every day. And sometimes entire train lines stop unexpectedly. But what makes Japan stand out isn't that problems never happen, it's the way the system responds when they do. Even when things go wrong, there's usually a plan, clear communication, well, at least in Japanese, and an effort to get millions of people moving again as quickly as possible. But I'd love to hear from you. Have you experienced a train delay in Japan? Did it completely ruin your plans, or did things work out in the end? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoy learning about the parts of Japan that tourists don't always hear about, make sure to subscribe to Tidbits from Japan for more videos like this.